Yeah, and if you look at marriages in general, the two things that cause the most disagreement in a marriage relationship are sex, which we've covered on a podcast, and money is number two.
That's right.
So it's important that we hit these head on, especially in this Family Matters series.
Yep.
What is that B word?
The B word, budget.
Yes,
that's when you say budget, people sometimes cringe a little bit when it comes to that.
And money's a tool. Tools should never beat us up. A budget's a tool. It's used to let us know where our yeses can be, because you'll understand debt, how to eliminate it, how not to be a slave to it. You will be a slave to bad debt.
That's right.
Good debt ought to bring freedom.
Welcome to the Orange Room. This is a podcast designed to facilitate conversations about real life.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Orange Room podcast, where we are going to be answering the questions this week about finances. Pastor Daniel, great job on Sunday opening up this conversation that we're going to dive into. And so we've got Pastor Daniel with us, Pastor Chris, and we've got Darren White as well. No guest to the podcast, been with us a couple times. So Chris, go ahead and tee us up. What is our first question looking at finances?
Yeah, well, let's do this first. Why are we talking about finances? Why is it important that we dedicate a week to this?
Yeah.
What would you say, Pastor Daniel?
Well, a couple of things. One, we mentioned in Sunday's message, the Bible speaks to finances more than any other topic. 2,300 plus times it speaks to money or possessions, how we manage it. And so we know from a biblical perspective, it's a big deal to God and knowing how we're wired. Psychology has found out that that's one of the primary motivators for us. You know, it's like we want security, health, and satisfaction. Well, the marriage can provide a lot of that, but security, we no longer have to worry about an animal jumping through the cave or through a hut, but the security we provide now is good financial management allows us to relieve a ton of pressure. So I think it's both from a biblical perspective and just from a secular perspective, there's agreement that this is a huge issue.
Yeah, and if you look at marriages in general, the two things that cause the most disagreement in a marriage relationship are sex, which we've covered on a podcast, and money is number two.
That's right.
So it's important that we hit these head on, especially in this Family Matters series.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, a lot of our questions this week have to do, one, with finance, but also with communication, I think. And so just a reminder for those tuning in, week one, was it, Pastor Austin? We went over communication, and I think a lot of the questions that we're going to look at today, it's a both and. They have to do with finances, but they also have to do with good communication. So if you've got some, maybe this is a good week to go back to back, communication and then finances. Okay, so here we'll start with this one. The question starts out this way: we are always broke. We have nice things, but we shouldn't. We're behind on bills and financially irresponsible. This creates a lack of trust and more issues pile up. How can my spouse and I get on the same page on this issue, finances?
Well, that is an important thing because the Bible talks about in Amos 3:3, how can two people agree or walk together if they can't agree on the same direction? So there has to be unity in the relationship. That's the first thing. And when we looked at the questions, there seems to be a little, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe a little edge to the comments on something like that. So it sounds like something that's been going on for a little bit.
Yeah.
So the way that they need to start dealing with it is they have to communicate, as you mentioned earlier, and start talking with each other, not to each other. Because it's very easy in a situation like this to be frustrated, to be just going on and get upset and all that. They've got to sit down and talk about it to make sure they're on the same page. Because my wife and I have had this problem. We've been in and out of debt in our younger life 4 times. We had to do it. And so it's definitely achievable. But the first thing is they have to come together with common goals, common direction on what they want to do. But it sounds like no one's wanting to really start that process at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the key is, how do you get on the same page? Communication starts it, but compromise is a part of
That's
it.
right.
And I love what Dallas Willard talks about. How do people change? He says he uses an acronym called VIM: vision, intention, and means. You have to first sit down together and create a vision. What could our lives look like if we were debt free? Imagine yourself living debt free. Imagine yourself living within your means. Paint a visual picture so you can both talk about it.
Right.
What kind of vacations would we go on? How would our children respond differently? What would our marriage be like? What would the stress level be like? Create a solid vision, then begin to be very intentional about it. When we say intention, it means I'm going to set a plan in place. I'm not going to aspire to it, because I'll never reach an aspiration without a plan. So I'll have a vision, then I'll create a plan, and then I create a means, a mechanism. Well, that may mean I need a budget. So I have a plan that we're going to get on a budget, then I make a budget. I'm going to live with them. I'm going to learn how to say no to myself. We're never going to make an impulse purchase. We're always going to wait 2 weeks before making a purchase. You set these ground rules because you've got a common vision. The issue is communication breaks down, trust breaks down, budgets break down when there's no common vision. So I would say y'all have to do that. Get a vision for what a debt-free life looks like.
That's right. And he used the B word, which to a lot of people, that's what it's like. Oh, I don't want to say that, because it's tough to say no to yourself. Oftentimes it's about
What is that
I
B
want.
word?
The B word, budget.
Yes,
Yes, that's when you say budget, people sometimes cringe a little bit when it comes to that. But here's a principle that I've learned that Lavina and I stick. Whatever you feed on, you hunger for. Okay.
Good.
So normally you think about that food. If you eat a lot of sweets, you want more sweets.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to get out of debt, if you just haphazardly say, I want to go shopping and look at this, or I just want to see what the price of cars are right now, you're feeding your mind on that. And guess what you're going to want to think about all the time? I need to get that car. I need that purchase. So being able to step back, because yes, it's probably going to take some sacrifice initially, but I love the way you described it. If you think about your future should look brighter than what you're going through right now. Because until the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, no one changes.
Yeah.
So if you're to a point now where you're frustrated and you can't get out, then I love that. That's the first time I've heard that. That's actually very good from Dallas Willard.
Yeah.
So how do we do this? Another question. They say, I see the issue. My spouse doesn't see the issue. So I guess this question, they're asking, what do we do in this case? I see it's an issue. They don't. Another question that I have on the heels of that would be, how do you know that you're in financial trouble?
When there's more bills than there is money. I think there's a fallacy that we live in many times. We convince ourselves of it. I understand what the issue is. You don't. And the reality is neither one of you do, because if you're a unit, if you're a couple, if you're on the same page, then you both see things relatively the same way. So keep the problem. Don't personify the problem. If I make my spouse the problem, they don't understand. I do. Now they're the enemy.
Right.
And someone's got to lose. We're made to win.
That's right.
So as long as we get on the same page, so I would say to the person that feels like they're right, you've got to see it from your spouse's perspective. And if you won't take the time to do that, you can't expect them to take the time to see it from your perspective. So keep the problem. The problem is we don't know how to manage our money well. We don't know. Not they don't know. We don't know. Get on the same page. Quit being competitive about it. Quit trying to make sure that you're the right one or they're the wrong one. And just agree that as a couple, we're not winning right now. And we can win financially using principles that are biblical and sound financially. And money's a tool. Tools should never beat us up. A budget's a tool. It's used to let us know where our yeses can be. And so if we'll do that, we'll find some victory there.
Yeah, and oftentimes there's usually one spouse who takes care of the finances in a relationship. It always happens. And you know what? That's fine. But what happens is that other spouse gets disconnected from it and isn't aware. So now
That's
that
right.
person doing it feels all the weight.
That's right.
They feel like if there's something on, it's on them. You can't do that. when people are married, it should be us against the world from a couple's perspective. It's okay if one person deals with it, but they need to bring the other person in every payday. Let's us go over it. I'll handle the mechanics. Let's talk about what's going on. And so they are a team, because if they're trying to do it isolated, it's someone's going to feel guilt. Someone's going to be ignorant of it. And you're going to have one person having one goal, the other person not being aware of it and going against it. And that's causing more conflict in the relationship.
So would you say one of the questions has to do with head of the household in regard to finances? Would you say that specifically the husband needs to do that? What they're saying is, I'm doing, and I think this is coming from the wife, I'm doing the finances, I'm doing the stuff for the kids, I'm doing the disciplining. I feel like I'm doing it all. And they seem to be under the impression that the husband should be managing the financial side of things. What would you have to say about that?
Well, I'd say one, biblically, the clearest measure that we have biblically is that God set up with the man being the head of the house. Not because he's to rule over, but there's an order that brings stability to the home, just like there's an order in heaven. And so he said that the man is the head of the home. The Bible says some things that are very, very weighty, right?
Yeah.
One thing it says, Paul says to Timothy that basically says if a man doesn't take care of his household, then he's worse than an unbeliever. It's a big deal to God. So what I'd say is, yes, the man should have leadership. Leadership doesn't mean you do everything.
Right.
A good leader can look at and say, they're better at that than I am.
Right.
But they're involved in it. I think it's not about shifting responsibility. It's sharing responsibility and elevating strengths. So if my wife is better at something than I am, I can say, hey, you take the lead in this, but I'm going to be a part of it.
Right.
It's not a healthy marriage if one person's carrying the load on everything, and there needs to be some communication to talk about that.
Yeah, because what I have seen in few people, my wife and I talk in couples at different times, many men have abdicated their role to their spouse to do that. And that isn't biblical, and you can't. The man is the head of the household. But you're right. God put us with our spouse because they have unique strengths.
Yeah.
And even to the point where if a wife has a great job and she's the primary breadwinner and he's doing something, that's okay. He can still be the head of the household in that regard and be able to contribute greatly and be able to do the things that he needs to do as a team. But it's one of the things, men have to be the person that God called them to be. And it just seems like now it's getting more and more difficult for them. I know that's a hard thing to say, but you see it more and more. And that's not in order the way God designed it.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we talk about it in the context of alignment, not power structure.
Yes.
Good.
And I think the mistake we make, and the reason we pull back many times, is we hear head of household or made the husband the head, as in he's more powerful than she is. There's many women that are more powerful emotionally than me, that are more. I couldn't give birth to say, if a man gave birth, we wouldn't be. It would be over. There'd be no more children. And so it's not about the power structure; it's about alignment. And when things are in proper alignment, a hose in proper alignment, things flow well. You get it kinked, things begin to back up. And I think that's what we need to have, families that are in proper alignment so that the blessings of God can flow, not so that we can dominate one another.
Yeah, because the Bible talks about that a man, the husband, should love his wife as Christ loved the church.
Yeah.
And he gave his life for it. So what does that mean? Serve.
That's right.
That's what the husband should be doing. He should
Very
be
good.
serving his wife. So where are the needs to be able to do that? And a woman, the way she's wired, will naturally respond to that type of leadership and that type of love.
Pastor Daniel, you talking about alignment. A lot of these questions, you can tell there's money is a friction point in a lot of marriages. For both of y'all, how practically, you threw out the B word, so budget, how did you, Mary Beth, you and Lavina, how did y'all and your families, how do you bring alignment? Budget being one of them. Looks like debt is another thing where, hey, we got to bring alignment. What practical things does that look like? Where I find myself, man, we're friction point. We got to come together. what are those practical things where people can bring alignment?
Well, I think one is you've got to communicate.
Yep.
What Mary Beth and I did, and I'm thankful for her, is she was not at all resentful of any type of plan I put together. She just wanted to be a part of it. She wanted to understand it. And we went to an envelope system one time because she wanted to know how much did she have available to her.
What is the envelope
The envelope system is we took our expendable cash, whether it was eating out money, buying clothes money, getting your hair
Groceries.
done,
Yep.
anything that was discretionary spending, a non-fixed item. I would give her an envelope, and it was so much money, and she knew that I can spend till the envelope's empty, and then there's no stress. Before it was spending, and I'm micromanaging everything. What'd you spend that for? What'd you spend that for? Because I'm worried about the budget.
That's
so we
right.
had to get on the same page, begin to talk about it, took stress off of her. And the funny thing happened was I mentioned where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That envelope became Mary Beth's treasure. And I told her, I said, anything you have left at the end of the month goes into the vacation account. And Mary Beth likes to travel. And so where I went from, say, I was the no one for a long time. Can we go do that? No. Can we go do that? No. Suddenly, Mary Beth went from being the yes person to let me think about this. So it helped us understand each other. But the question about the tool was any tool is just secondary to having you both on the same page. No tool is going to work if you're not using it well together. But a budget is a tool to understand how to leverage my income for my lifestyle so that I know what I can do without violating safety, without violating scripture, without violating the security of my spouse. Guys, if you want your wife to be happy, provide security.
That's right.
If she feels safe and secure, you've got a happy wife and a happy life. If she feels insecure because the creditors are calling and past new notices, she feels unsafe. She doesn't have a nest that feels like it's hers, and you're going to have problems.
That's
good.
both financially and emotionally.
That's right.
They need to feel secure. And the nice thing about a budget is if you agree on the budget, then if someone wants to spend extra money, it's not the other person telling them no. Well, let's see what Mr. Budget says.
Yeah.
Oh, nope, we can't do that. So you don't have anyone pitted against the other person.
Maybe I'd love to.
I'd love to, but the budget says that.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, when we were younger, I'm the spender, or
Yeah.
at least was back then. I had a secret credit card I didn't tell Lavina from because I was immature and wanted to do things because, again, that whole selfish nature. And I wanted to do it. It came out. I was tough. I didn't listen to her. She was doing the budget early on, and I caused a lot of problems because of my insecurity, but it was based on my selfishness. Why did I had friends who weren't married, got to do fun things. Why couldn't I do fun things? So part of it is a maturing to realize I didn't like where I was. I didn't like where the relationship was. So we had to step back. Okay, I have to be a participant now in what we're doing, and I've got to take it serious. Because for me, the pain of staying the same was too great. I had to change. But a budget is an amazing thing because you do start seeing, okay, we've got a little extra money now. Now we've got a little bit more. And those little wins builds enthusiasm, it builds excitement, and makes you want to do that more. So that's really what you need. You just need a few quick wins that all of a sudden this becomes a lot easier. But starting off, there is sacrifice. I've known people who have downgraded cars to try to do it because their car payment was too high. Sold the car, got a less expensive used car because it made it where they could fit in their budget. So you may have to do things like that, but I promise you that the piece of getting out of debt and getting your finances under control far outweighs the sacrifice that you make early on because nothing is a sacrifice for peace.
Yeah. But I think most people dislike budgets because they think it's a designed to take all the fun out, to tell them no. Think of it this way. A budget tells you where you can for sure say yes, and it tells you where you have to say not yet. A budget isn't designed to tell you no. It's just designed to tell you not yet. I can't do that yet. But if I follow the plan, eventually I'll get a yes. But if you don't have a plan, you're stuck with no's because you're either going to get a no because it gets repossessed. You got it anyway, and they came and took it from you, or you're going to break a relationship to where now there's child support and everything else going on. The no's are going to come in life, and they're going to be hard no's. unless you're in control of it. And that's the crazy thing is God gave us the principles because he wants to trust us to rule well now so that we can rule well with him later.
That's right.
Very good. Okay, so here's a question. You mentioned whenever you recognize that you're in a tough spot, you said you've heard of couples downsizing or trading in their cars. This question says, how do I navigate whenever I start to feel like I can't provide for myself or we can't meet, we've got stuff coming in and we're not able to pay for it. What are some practical steps that people can start to take?
Well, the first thing you should probably look at is you've got two choices when it comes to a situation like that. How much money you have coming in, can you increase that? Or can you decrease the amount of money going out? I mean, it's really simple math on that. So you need to really look at what you're spending, what's really going, because sometimes we can confuse wants with needs.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the first things you need to do. What am I spending now that maybe is a luxury, or maybe I like to have it, but I don't need it right now.
Yeah.
So that's the very first thing you should do is evaluate where are you and what does that look like as far as the first step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we have to understand when we're evaluating the difference between good debt and bad debt. And there are things that are they're good debt.
Yeah.
What is good debt? Good debt is going to help me increase my income. If I got an education, I paid for an education. What makes paying for an education good debt? One, a good education should position me for a better job and more pay, right? So, and it's going to appreciate. The same education I can get today will cost to get that same education will cost more later. So it appreciates in value. Good debt. A house, normally it's a good debt. You may find that you bought too big of a house and need to downsize, but it normally appreciates. Bad debt are things that once you pay for it, it's worth less.
Yeah.
Cars, bad debt. Credit cards, bad debt. Going out to eat, bad debt. I don't have anything to show for it after I leave the table. And that's what we have to discern between what's good and what's bad. And when you don't know the difference, you've got tools like what Dave Ramsey does in Financial Peace, is he sets up a financial system that's really, without taking away from it all, it's like training wheels. If you don't know how to understand it, here's a tool. It's the training wheels of life. It is not a 10-speed. It's certainly not a motorcycle. It is not going to get you necessarily to the top 1%, but it will bring stability to your finances, and it will bring peace to your home because you'll understand debt, how to eliminate it, how not to be a slave to it. You will be a slave to bad debt.
That's right.
Good debt ought to bring freedom. And we need to understand that difference because part of that process is we need to ruthlessly eliminate bad debt from our lives. That is going to make you a slave to the borrower, according to Scripture. It's just not a good idea. And when you can't say no to yourself, when you cannot delay gratification and you have to say yes, and you can't discern between want and needs, bad debt is what drowns people.
Right.
Very rarely does good debt drown people. Bad debt drowns people.
And the worst debt, bad debt, is credit cards. If you look at the rates, I mean, you're talking 18 to 21%. Don't have a lot of time to go into what compound interest does to that because it's terrible. So it's one of those things. They're hard decisions, but it just depends on how bad do you want to get out. That's really what it is. How serious is the individual wanting to get out of it to make those tough calls? Because they will be tough.
And that question too, the providing for yourself, right? You say no, where you can say no whenever it comes to spending. But the beautiful thing is too, you look at Scripture, the Lord will provide the essentials. And whenever Sermon on the Mount, Jesus unpacks. So the providing ultimately, again, if our lifestyle's way out of whack, right? But once we bring that alignment with the Lord and stuff, I mean, there's a peace of mind that comes whenever we know at the end of the day, those essential things, the Lord will ultimately, He's called provider in Scripture.
Yeah, and I think the hard part is our culture thinks everything's essential.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Right.
I have a need. I have a want. We think those are equal, and I don't need an iPhone.
I was just going to.
I don't need an Apple Watch. I don't need a Ferrari. Now, I'd like all of those things, right? It's the ability to step back and go, if we can acknowledge we live in the best country in the world, God has blessed us. Even on our worst day, we're in good shape. There's no one that I know of that I've ever walked through this process with that when we really sat down and had the conversation of let's talk about need and want, and they had a reality where they were going, I just don't want to not have it.
Yep.
But would you rather get rid of that or hold on to the stress? Keep it, hold on to the stress, or get rid of it and find peace. You have a choice to make. And that's the beauty of it. This isn't us dictating to anybody. We all have a choice to make.
Yeah.
If you want a life that's more peaceful, less stressful, there are benefits to doing it God's way. There are benefits to wisdom, and it will lead to less stress. It'll be, I can have money set aside that so when something negative happens, I don't have to go to bad debt to pay for it. I've got an emergency fund. When I have the ability, we always talk about people with money make money. Why? Usually because they are ready in the moment of opportunity to say yes to the opportunity because they have assets. It positions us better because I guarantee you there are people that moments of opportunity have come, but they weren't able to move on the opportunity because they couldn't get it together in time.
That's right.
And that goes into how destructive bad debt is because it not only costs you now, it costs you for every opportunity in the future because we don't understand what it does to our credit rating, what it does to our borrowing potential, what it does. So the person that mentioned earlier, we've got nice stuff, but we can't afford it. Well, here's the crazy thing about it. The next thing that you want that's nice, you can't afford it for sure because you're going to pay more for it than the guy with
That's right.
good stewardship does because you're going to pay it out over time at an elevated interest rate. It's going to cost you a lot more. And so it's really about how to get yes and peace, not about how to do without.
And one of the things that creates a lot of this is, and it's a very dangerous thing, is comparison.
Yes.
We will look at other people and compare ourselves.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's
that's
the way society is. Look at me. You have social influencers. You have all these people showing what they have. You're seeing someone at their best and you think, I need that outfit.
Yeah.
Or I need to look like that. Or I need to do that. And we get sucked up in this cultural thing and not feeling gratification and thankfulness for what we have. We're feeling discontent because we don't have what someone else has. And sometimes it can be emotional. How many people emotionally buy? You know, when they feel, some people emotionally eat, some people emotionally shop. You don't know.
Yeah.
But all of these things, I've always believed that if we look outward and there's something that we're coveting and wanting and stuff like that, what we're saying to God is we're not content with what He's given us. And that's kind of a bad place to be because God will take us through a process when we're good stewards. And we haven't talked a lot about stewardship yet. When we're good stewards with His money, He will take us to this place because we have to think of it. It's not ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, there does seem to be a correlation between healthy spirituality and becoming or being healthy financially. You know, as you're talking about we're able to say, we know what we're freed up to say yes to this, to give to this because I'm controlled and saying no to this. I think there's a pretty clear bridge there.
Yeah.
Pastor Austin, would you like to say anything about that? The connection between stewardship and being in healthy spirituality?
I guess I've always heard stewardship in direct correlation with it is a heart issue at the end of the day.
Good.
And I think too, as we were looking at the marriage questions, it almost seems like money is just a magnifier of if there's disunity in the marriage, if there is a greed issue, a wanter issue where I've got to have these iPhones that are essential to me. It just seems like a magnifier. And so the stewardship, I've just heard it's just going to magnify and illuminate what the condition of your heart is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, money doesn't change you. It just makes who you are louder.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a question before we kind of move into maybe some more stewardship stuff. One question that I thought was great, talking about this in our marriages and finances, this balance, should spouses share bank accounts? Looks like they've got their own. Husband has his, wife has his. Darren, you mentioned the credit card. Can y'all hit on that?
Yeah, I'll start off. Here's the thing. If this is a first marriage, because I think separating it for different reasons. The question I would ask is, why would you want them separate? Because you're going into a new relationship, and what is it that's causing you to think about separating finances when the two are becoming one? That's the first thing, because that's a heart issue. What is it that's going on in the heart that's doing that? Because I'm a proponent, if we're going to be doing this together, I'm a proponent of combining finances. That's what we did, and that's my opinion. Okay, that's what I believe. If you're talking about a second marriage or something like that, and we all bring our own baggage, our own experience to something like that, if there's a little hesitation and stuff like that, then I think it's a little bit more about the two of them working that out together. I'm still a proponent of it, but I can understand if someone has some reservations about it. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think a lot of it, whether it's a heart issue or not, it comes down to trust.
Yeah.
Well, and we can talk about stewardship. Stewardship is a trust issue, 100% trusting God. This is an issue of, do I trust the other person? And what I really think is important is, why am I not trusting? We've got to ask questions. What is my hesitation? Is it something this person's done, or is it something that I've experienced? Because if we'll ask the questions, we can get to the root of the issue and find healing. Here's what I say about Christian marriage. And the reason I would say I would be careful about having separate accounts, because I think it's a magnifier of something deeper. We believe in covenant marriage, not contractual marriage.
That's right.
Marriage licensing with the state of Texas and government is a contractual obligation that courts get involved in. We are a covenant people, the marriage covenant. That's why we do marriages in churches and have pastors do them, because a contract says, I'm going to bring this set of responsibilities and finances to the arrangement. You're going to bring this set of responsibilities and finances to the arrangement. And if you'll do your part and I do my part, we'll make happy. If you don't do your part and I don't do my part, we have a method to break it. A covenant says what God says. He's faithful when we're not. A covenant is saying, here's what I'm going to do for you no matter what you do for me in return.
That's right.
I'm a covenant. We're a covenantal people no matter what they do in return. So there's something keeping me from going into covenant at that point, and I think we should talk about it. What's going on? Not to condemn anyone, but to get deeper. It may be something you're dealing with that has nothing to do with the other person. Well, let's find healing.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Very good. Now, lastly here, we've got questions about tithing. Can we talk about the tithe a little bit? One here says, my spouse says, I don't have enough. We don't have enough to tithe. Another says, I don't even know if tithing's mentioned in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Where would we like to start in talking about tithing?
Yeah. I'll start there.
You start. Yeah, you go ahead and
One, I think we have a gross misunderstanding of the tithe in the church today because of bad teaching and religion. One, Jesus did not come to abolish anything. He came to fulfill everything that the Old Testament said. So if the Old Testament spoke to it, it's still true. It's still good. It's still applicable. We just want to see what was it meant to accomplish on its best. So when we look at the tithe in the Old Testament, the tithe was not a membership fee of Judaism, just like the tithe is not a membership fee of Christianity. The tithe was and will always be meant to say, Father, we honor you, God. I honor you because I trust you. I trust that when I give back to you, you can take better care of me than when I try to take care of myself. Tithing was a trust issue predominantly. Secondly, it was the provision of family, that I would love one another. It was to glean the field. It was a tithe went to the ministry, the priesthood. A tithe was meant to say, in Psalm, the psalmist said, I've never seen the Lord forsaken or his kids begging for bread. Why? because the storehouse was meant to be full. So it was a trust issue. Now you bring that to the New Testament. Jesus did affirm the tithe. He said to the Pharisees, you tithe mint, you tithe deal, which you should, which is appropriate. However, there's something better. And if you use just the book of Acts as the starting point, the tithe, talk about training wheels, tithing is the training wheels of giving. So if I looked at someone as a child learning to do training wheels, I'd go, good job, you're learning to ride a bike. If I look at an adult riding a bike with training wheels, I think, oh my goodness, how have they not left this behind yet? That's what the New Testament says about the tool. Because in the book of Acts, they weren't tithing, they were selling everything and giving it for the care of others. So the tithe is a beginning place. We have tried to make it into a spirituality checkbox that, I tithe, and we use it as a relief so that I've done my part. I'm telling you, if you look at it biblically, that was never the heart of the tithe. It was never a checkbox. It was a trust issue. I trust you, Father, that you can take better care of me than I can myself, and I will love and care for. I am my brother's keeper. Echoing all the way back to the garden. Yes, I am my brother's keeper. Fast forward to the New Testament. Do I still need to show trust for God? Yes. Can he still take better care of me than I can myself? Yes. Am I still my brother's keeper? Yes. And then he says, and I've got so much more for you. Just like God gives, you give. Well, God gave without limit in His Son. Well, you give without limit. So be Spirit-led. It's not about checking a box.
That's right.
But I think if we get the heart of it and we recognize I can't outgive God, then I'm not stopping with the tithe. I decided a long time ago, 10% was a starting place. It is not my ending place. My goal, I want to give to where God has to go. I'm working to outgive Daniel. I'm not there yet. But you start with 2, 4, 10. I mentioned Sunday that families that have gotten up to 30. Mary Beth and I, that's our target, is to get up in that range. I love what Rick Warren does. I'm not a huge purpose-driven life guy, but I know what he does. When he said, I practice reverse tithing, he lives on 10% and gives away 90%. I'm like, I don't know anything else about you, but I respect you.
That's right.
That because he trusts God.
That's right. And one thing we have to remember, you were talking about the law. Tithing predates the law.
Yeah.
I mean, Abraham went and took over Lot, who was captured by kings. I don't remember the names of. Yeah, and then he came back. First thing he did from the spoils, he gave 10% to Melchizedek, who was the Prince of Salem, Prince of Peace. Here's the thing. Since that was before the law, who taught him that principle? God had to. That's a principle that goes on long before. And something, if you think about it, the tithe does not belong to us. It's God's. How do I know that? Every instance, and I challenge anyone to look this up, where it mentions the tithe, it says bring the tithe. It doesn't say give the tithe, it says bring it. Why does it say that? Because you don't bring something that doesn't belong to you. If I loan Pastor Daniel my truck for the week, because I'm going to be out of town, and he comes back to give, he says, Darren, I want to give you this truck. Well, no, it's my truck. You can't give it to me. You're bringing it back to me. That's the way God sees the tithe.
Wow.
So everything above that 10% is offerings and everything like that. So when people say, I tithe 2%, you're starting to work towards the tithe. And that's good. God is not judging you if you're not at 10%. You're trusting. And we all go through a faith walk where we learn to trust Him a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more.
When should I pick up your truck, by the way? I like that truck.
Very good. Now, I wonder too, maybe Darren, you could speak to this practically. What is the tithe doing? So for the people who are filling the house of God all across the country and they are bringing their offering, what are some practical things the tithe's doing? I know that some people might think, man, am I just like keeping the lights on and lining the pockets of pastors? Practically, what does the tithe do?
Sure. So the tithe that we have coming in not only pays the salaries of the pastors, not only pays the electric bill and everything here, but we have at least 10%. The church tithes on the tithes that we receive that goes outside of the church. So whether it's in the community, whether it's establishing churches in Mexico, whether we're doing something other churches building, we send that out because what we believe, for the same reason we believe people will be blessed when we give it here, we want to be good stewards.
That's right.
Because it's not just because it's given here, we're stewards because it's still God's money that
That's
they
right.
give from them. So we want to be good stewards. So we are very careful. We are in the best financial position this church has ever been in
Wow.
because of the faithfulness of people. But we're also trying to be very faithful about what we do. We look at where we spend our money. We make sure God is in it. And we make sure that it doesn't, we're not just holding it. We're not accumulating it.
That's
We're making sure it goes out. Because what we want to be, if you think about what grace is the Spirit of the Lord coming in and flowing through us. That's what we want to be. We want to be able to have resources that come in and flow out to God's people. Because when you start looking at true treasures in heaven, you know what those true treasures are? People. That's the only true treasure there is, people. So the more that we can bless people and help people, whether it's benevolence, whether it's outreach, anything like that, then that's what we're excited about doing. And we want to consistently be able to do that for just more than the community, as much as wherever God calls us to do it. You have anything to add?
And I think the great thing about it is we're talking about it within the context of the church. And guess what the church has every year? A budget.
That's right.
And the budget tells us what our priorities are.
Yeah.
It tells us how we're managing the tithe. How important are our kids? How important are our children? How important is benevolence? How important is outreach? How important are things? That's what it does. And so the church is not only practicing the tithing, but it's also practicing delayed gratification and stewardship and management. And I think that's healthy.
Absolutely.
That we're not asking or recommending people do something that we as an organization
Very good.
and individuals don't practice.
That's right.
Man, so last question I'll ask here is, how early can we start talking about stewardship and finances with our kids?
Yeah. Well, I think talk about stewardship starts first. The concept of stewardship is I manage well. I take care of what's mine. You're teaching stewardship when you teach your kids to put their toys back up after they play with them. When I talk about leaving the pair of pliers out in the yard, and I got a stewardship lesson. It felt it for a week. But that reality is that's how we begin teaching stewardship. And then we teach money management by creating, whether it's chores or our kids babysit or mow lawns in the neighborhood, and we encourage them by encouraging them to do what hopefully they've seen mom and dad do, is tithe. I want my kids to learn to worship by watching me worship. I want them to learn to pray by watching me pray. I want them to learn giving and stewardship by watching me give, so that it looks like it's natural. I'm not asking them to do something that's foreign to them. And then I celebrate when they do it. When they come in and say, I gave this, or we remind them, hey, you made $1. Let's put a dime in at least. Let's do some training wheel stuff. Great job. I'm so proud of you. And then when they do it, when you don't even ask, when you don't remind them, then you really celebrate. That dime, you go and get them a Dairy Queen ice cream for that dime. It'll cost you way more than that dime, but they'll associate a blessing with doing things God's way. And we're just partnering with heaven in that.
That's right. And I think the other thing that I love the parable of the talents. You know, he gave some 10, 5, and when you look at that and how God and Jesus in the parable talks about the person that just put it away, buried it, did nothing with it. He even said you could have taken it to the bank and earned interest on it. So a lot of people that like to hold on to stuff, that's not what he wants. I've prayed oftentimes, he gave more to the 10 talent person, and Lord, make me a 10 talent giver. So I can be a vessel to throw out. So when you talk to your kids and everything like that, if you can let them know that money is a tool, that money does not provide happiness, it does not provide peace, but it's a way for you to bless other people, and through that, God blesses you because he can trust you, because it's a test. 10%, the tithe, everything is a test. And if we can do that, then we feel it's easy to give away something when you know it's not yours. You said that. So it's a beautiful way to do that. Teaching kids that you can't start too early. And I love your example of starting with the stewardship side before you, because we started with the banks, putting the little money in the bank to do that. But I love the stewardship side.
And I don't know if I'm right. I'd like to hear y'all's opinion on this. I've heard people say you make your kid, they make $1, you take a dime and do it for them. Or I don't want to give it. I don't want to do it. What do you do whenever your child says, I don't want to give? How do you handle that? I know how I handled it, and people may disagree, but I didn't make them give. If they didn't want to, I said, "Hey, God loves a cheerful giver, not someone that does it begrudgingly." And so, but I just talked to them, and then later, I would find a teachable moment when they wanted something, and I'd tell them no, and I'd just kind of drop. I wonder if that's how God felt, but. I've also heard people say, no, you're going to give. So I didn't know how to,
We basically said, okay, we just made it like very matter of fact. You got this, that's great. So now put your money in your savings, your money in the church.
It just
box.
became a rhythm.
It just became a rhythm.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what we wanted them not even thinking about. Then if they asked questions about it, we were more than happy to discuss it. But we wanted it just to be practical. That's what we do.
I had one kid that was a little harder on me. Like, I don't know if I want to do that. Dad, you're tithing enough.
That's right.
Very good. Well, Pastor Austin, anything that you'd like to say to wrap us up? And if not, what do we got going on?
Yeah. Great conversation. Thank you, Pastor Daniel and Darren. And we're excited, Chris, right, for this weekend.
Absolutely.
Saturday, we are having our Family Matters Conference. Man, this series has flown by. Just love these podcasts, love the conversations we're doing. But yeah, this coming Saturday, 8:30 to noon, we have our Family Matters Conference. We're having breakout sessions. Darren, you're actually leading one on finances. Yeah. And Dave and Ashley Willis will be with us at the conference, but also Sunday morning as well. All the morning services, they will be here. And so we're so thankful to have them. And we were talking, Chris, you and I, so we got that coming up. And then with the Orange Room podcast, we're creating some ideas. So this podcast, right, it's not going anywhere.
The Orange Room isn't going anywhere. We've got more conversations to come that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So we got some stuff working, and can't wait for the conference this Saturday, and we'll see y'all there. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.